Opportunity. Appreciate the chamber putting this on. Gives us one more opportunity, not just candidates, but the citizens. If you're on the fence, this is serious business. We need to know, make sure we're selecting the right candidate. We'll let the train go by real quick. Like I said, I think it's very important, probably more so than any time in our history, that we elect a mayor that's willing to stand up for our rights as Artesians, as U.S. citizens. Won't get into the politics of it. You all have felt the effects of it over the last 2.5 years. And I think we can do things a little differently. So that being said, I was expecting you guys asking me questions, but if you would allow me, I'd like to go over some of the things I'm wanting to do and maybe go into a little more detail. So I did bring some flyers today. If you didn't pick one up, you're welcome to. I'd like to go over my vision and focus and maybe fill in some of the blanks. There's not a lot of room on a 2-page flyer to give you much of anything but the highlights. So when I first started thinking about running for mayor, I started a list of the things I wanted to see done differently in our city, things I felt like I had a fresh view on. Maybe I could bring some life back into it. Maybe that was the case. So we'll just start at the top. My very first ambition is I want to empower our city department heads and require a goal plan that establishes accountability. I feel like we have some really good department heads. I don't feel like their roles are well defined. I think we need to have some goals for our departments, both short and long term, so that we can have some more accountability. So if you have a set goal and you don't accomplish your goal, we need to have a really good reason for that, or we're headed down the wrong path, right? So I do that at my workplace. I have annual goals, and if I don't meet those goals, I have to answer for it. I think that path is lacking in our city. So that's my first thing I want to do, and I think it'll give us some accountability where everybody knows where we stand. And it's fair to both sides, not just the council and the mayor and the citizens, but also the department heads. Secondly, I want to develop a mayor's citizens advisory board to help direct the path that our local government should take. We talk, we meet people on the streets, we get ideas, but I think if we could assemble a group of people, a very diverse group of people that truly represents our community, let them sort through ideas, let them filter to the council and mayor what they want for our city. It's no secret that there are some spare dollars in the coffers right now. It'd be real easy to go out and waste those. I don't believe in that. But if there are truly some things that our citizens are wanting and needing, then I think they should have a direct say in how we spend those dollars. So that's my plan, at least for the 4 years that I'm in office, is that we're taking the lead from the citizens of our community. Number 3 kind of ties into the second one, seek citizen input on all major projects. So just some examples, we just finished building a brand new swimming pool. I don't know that our citizens had a whole lot of say in what went into that pool. I know as a counselor I didn't. We were given a set of plans and it's either yes or no. There were no options. I think it's important if we're going to spend that kind of money for our communities, more especially something's got to be taken care of for several years to come, that the citizens have more say in that. So that's the point of my third goal. I'd like to pull out our city master plan, shake the dust off of it, and let's take a fresh look at it. I don't know that it's been looked at in the last 6 to 8 years. Let's see what the plan is. Let's make sure it still fits what we do today. We've been through a lot since then. You know, we've all adapted and had to do things differently in our lives. Maybe we've acquired some new interests, new ways we want, new direction we want to see our community go in. So let's get the plan out. Let's get it to the advisory board. And let's look it over and update it if necessary. We need to invest more in our current community assets. So namely, public parks. It's been a hot issue. I didn't come here today to beat up on the current administration. I swore I wouldn't do that, and I'm not going to. However, I would do things differently. My first goal is to get some contract labor. Let's get these parks back in the shape that they were prior to COVID and everything else that changed our lives, so that our park staff can focus more on the things they need to be doing. Painting the swing set, cleaning up around the play equipment, things like this. When we have a limited staff, more especially in the summertime, they spend 90% of their time mowing. So it takes 2 days to mow Eagle Draw. So that's 2 employees down 2 days a week. We can contract that work out and let those employees be working on the things that you people see daily, that you have an issue with. So that's my initial plan there, is to get more assets put into these community assets that we have. Continue and improve on city employee retention plans. Police and fire is a hot issue in this election. Not just in Artesia, but nationwide, there is a lack of, let me back up. There is not a lack of respect for our police and fire in Artesia. Nationwide, there is a trend that none of us in this room like, I'm sure. So the police, more especially, have gotten a bad rap. Locally, our problems seem to be more around pay for our emergency responders, police and fire. My proposal, at least at the fire department, is day one, we need to start looking at raising the rates for these entry-level firefighters. I was embarrassed to find out that when minimum wage went up, we had to give our entry-level firefighters a raise. That's embarrassing. And I blame myself for not realizing they were as low paid as they were. So you're taking a recruit that maybe it's one of my grandkids 15 years from now that wants to be a firefighter. And you want to pay them minimum wage for 4 months until they can go to school, go through the motions, and learn to be a firefighter. So that particular slot in our emergency response can't wait until budget time. We need to fix that now. I was going to propose when I started this list that we do a citywide salary survey. That's already in the works though. Once we get a third-party assessment of our salaries versus all of our outlying, well, you might as well call them competitors. They're competing for our firemen and our police. Truck drivers in the oil field even. We get some complaints about garbage. Well, we get a good garbage truck driver, he gets a job in the oil field and he's gone. Get him trained up. So it's not just police and fire, but our entire city. We're going to have to look at our salary structure, see where we are comparatively to our neighbors, and make adjustments where necessary. So, and that's already in the works. Pursue public-private partnerships to accomplish our common goals. We already do that. I think we do a really good job as a community working with private industry, donors, working with the school system. If we work as a team, we'll just use an example of the swimming pool. If that was not a partnership, it probably wouldn't have happened, because that's way over anything that our city currently could afford to do. But we were able to partner with a lot of good people in the schools and get that accomplished. I think our next big project's probably a new rec center. That's what I'm hearing. And let me just say this, I have to step back occasionally and know that it's not necessarily what Jeff wants, it's what you want. What's best for the community. And that's what I'm hearing. So that's probably going to be our focus as far as our next big project. Public safety enhancement, we really went over that when we were talking about salaries. We have some really good police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and we have good department heads in that area. They are offered some of the best training in the state, and if you don't believe that, you can ask them. That's, fortunately for us, one reason why a lot of them are hesitant to leave is because they get the ongoing training that they can't get from other agencies. We just got to get their salaries right to where they can make a living and be comfortable. More council involvement in the day-to-day workings of City Hall. So any of you that know me know I work for Navajo. I have a full-time job. Some people have said, how are you going to do both? So this is my view. First of all, the mayorship of Artesia is not a full-time job. It's a part-time job. I have plenty of time off. I'm off every other Friday. I'm off weekends. I get off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I can take off if I need to. I have 6 weeks vacation and I can use it accordingly. So I will make time. Now, some of the meetings that our current administration attends, they may have to be moved to a different time if they're counting on the mayor to be there. They just may have to be at a different time of day. I have another thought too on that. I'll come back to it. Oh, more council involvement. So for example, the mayor does a radio show every Wednesday morning after a council meeting. Why is it the mayor every time? Why can't each council member take a turn and talk to the citizens of their district? So that helps me out there too. That's one less meeting I have to attend every 2 weeks. So, and it gets our council more involved with you as members of the district. Know what's going on. So you can, that way you guys can communicate back and forth and let your counselor know what you expect. Doing business with City Hall should be elementary. We need to pursue modern communication methods. So paying your water bills, you should be able to do that online easily, whether that be an app or permitting, the building permits that we do. That should be able to be done online. There's all kinds of neat stuff out there, and don't ask me what they are because I am not computer savvy, but I know there's communities that have apps that are tied to their water meter. If they have a leak, they get an alarm. They know they used 1,000 gallons of water last night. Just different things like that. We need to spend the effort, talk to the people that do know what it takes to come into the 21st century. So I want to modernize communication with City Hall. Increase efforts to attract new business and industry. Haley, Rob, the staff at the chamber, they do a great job. Rob's out there, he's looking for contacts, but I think they need some help. I think we need to enhance what we're doing to try to attract new industry to this area. Exactly what that looks like, I don't know. But I know Rob spins his wheels a lot of times, and maybe he feels like he's not getting the support from the city administration, and I want to change that. I think we need a closer relationship where if we need to put some resources towards something he's pursuing, we can do that. So everybody knows there's an ongoing battle against the things that make our living: oil and gas, ranching, farming, dairy industry. It's not going to get any better. We've got to pursue different industry as it becomes available, so that when the bottom falls out of oil, the bottom doesn't fall out of the city as well. I know other, let's just say politicians, for lack of a better term, have said the same thing year after year. But we're going to have to get together and figure out how we're going to bring people to this area to set up shop. Research and seek improvement in youth programs and opportunities. We have some very capable and worthy council candidates right now. They're real passionate about youth activities for the youth. I had one counselor candidate tell me, you know, not every kid's an athlete. What about recreation for the other kids? You know, we do a really good job at football, baseball, soccer, and these things. What about the kid that doesn't want to do any of that? You know, I'm a parent, but my kids are, you know, they're not little anymore. So, but there's people in the community that know what these things are that would help our kids. Maybe a dog park. I think that's a great idea. You know, I visited one in Omaha the last 2 weeks ago, and it was a great thing. People were having a good time. They came out as a family. They take the dog to the park every week. It's an activity for families. So things like that. And that, I went through all 12 points. So I don't want to take up any more of the time that you people are allotted for questions. So hit me with what you got.
You mentioned it's embarrassing as far as the entry level, like what their wages are. You've been on the city council for a while. How were you not aware of how embarrassing that wage is? I couldn't do it as a woman, and then I printed everything. As a man, I don't see how they could do it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to explain this. Firefighters make overtime. They work if they're making $10 an hour, let's say, when you average all their time and their overtime, it's not $10 an hour. If that makes sense, because they're gonna work a 48-hour schedule. So 16 hours of that is straight time, and the rest of it is overtime. But even at that, the part I call embarrassing is when you have to change their base rate because minimum wage went up. And I don't have a calculator in front of me, but let's just say if you work all that overtime, your real rate's like $15, $16 an hour. It may be more than that or a little less. But that's what I was referencing.
Even then, I mean, I make more money than that. Why would I want to go and try to do, or why would I want my husband to go do that? And what about the housing? There's not affordable housing here.
Yeah. So.
Period. Especially if you're a single woman.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah. So as far as, and I'll give you one idea I have at least for city employees. I want to either build or find housing that the city can purchase, that these people coming in at the lower levels, for example, a firefighter recruit, he's not going to get a big bump until he gets through the academy. And once he gets his EMT license and works his way up 2 or 3 years from now, he's making more of a livable wage, but we can also help them on the housing side. Not only can we raise their wage to get it more competitive, but also help them on the housing because that's their biggest cost. More especially if you've got, let's say, a recruit coming from Roswell that wants to move here. It's real difficult to get people to move here.
Right,
a lot
because
of them
they're driving back and forth, and after working 16-hour days, who wants to drive back and forth? Because you can't afford to live here.
Right.
But are we only talking about firemen?
No, I'm talking in general because I worked for the water department. There was absolutely no way I could have been a single mom and worked on those wages. Absolutely not.
Right. So I can tell you some things we have done. Not saying it's enough, but we tore down the old hospital. We built Roselawn Manor. That's affordable housing. There's a new project next to Fletsey that hasn't broke ground yet, but it's like 180 units. That's affordable housing. Canyon Stone Apartments has happened in the last few years.
It's not really affordable.
I was gonna say, what do you classify affordable?
1,400, that's not affordable.
Yeah.
Not for a mom, and if you're a single mom, say for instance, and I'm not a single mom, I am married, and you've got to find daycare.
Yeah.
Daycare's outrageous. So for me, the obvious choice was to leave the city as soon as I possibly could. And I'm making, a great income, but even so, if I was to become single, I still wouldn't be able to afford to be in the house that I'm in right now. In some of the houses, I look on Realtor, I look on Zillow. Oh my gosh,
Oh, I know.
the price is outrageous for dumps.
I'm going to make a statement, and I may get crucified over it, but the housing market in Artesia, God bless their soul, was ruined by Fletsey.
Absolutely, everybody says that. Everybody says that.
Wait a minute, I have rentals. And renting to Fletsey is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is.
They want you to, are you buying the toilet paper and are you wiping my ass? I bought some guy barbecue equipment and I saw him on the truck going to Roswell.
Right.
I love being a landlord here.
I don't think it's so much Fletsey. I think it's the greedy people here knowing they can get the money.
Not all of us, believe me. The last time I went and changed the water for a house, the gal at the water department rented it. She's not gonna do anything.
You're one of the few, because I know that they've rented for like $3,000 or more.
Yeah.
Where's
your fault, folks? So, in an effort to, I'm probably not going to answer your question to your satisfaction, but I will say that I'm fully aware We have a housing problem, and we're gonna have to continue to work on it. If we can convince developers to come here and build housing more on the level that you're talking about, then that's the types of things that we can work with the chamber and Rob and the Citizens Action Council to get in touch with people and try to make it happen. We can't make anybody do anything.
Right, and that comes with also with the wages, like just like you mentioned, you know, you did mention the dog park, but our parks now aren't even over at MLK. People will post it all the time. Social media is like, you know, everything, communication. The trash cans are constantly overflowing. Who wants to go there? Even anywhere you go, you know, all the kids obviously they're on their phones, but you go to the little splash park, the kids they're hiding their phones, they're not paying attention. Obviously, it's a, you know, as a parent, you're not just going to go drop off your child, but our parks need to be revamped before we bring in a dog park.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree with you.
Mhm.
And fixing these parks back up can happen instantly. It's a matter of putting the resources toward them.
The resources and because
But
we
as a
are
single councilman, I can't do that.
exactly, and so because we are in a surplus, why don't we focus, you know, on, you know, making our city look,
I
you know,
agree.
good.
I agree with you.
And we do
100%.
have a pretty new park. I do, you know, I will mention that.
I agree with you.
She mentioned something about the trash, how these dumpsters are being all filled up. What is the city doing, or would you know, about illegal dumping? I mean, even in my alley, we get people that are going through the alleys illegal dumping their own trash. You know, what is the city doing?
So several years ago, we used to hire contract people to come, because our garbage trucks can't pick them up.
Right.
If you throw a mattress in the alley, the truck can't pick it up. We had contract crews that 3-4 times a year, they would make all the alleys and pick that stuff up and haul it to the dump, and that hasn't happened.
But what I'm talking about, people that are coming out from the county or from somewhere else and dumping their trash in our dumpsters, making the residents not, you know, too full to dump. Has the city done anything, or has anybody brought it to their attention on that?
I'm not aware that the county is filling our dumpsters. I haven't.
Residential
I'm not saying it's not happening. I just haven't heard of that.
It's hard to catch them.
Now,
Well, and with that, if you are a city resident and you pay water, you can dump your trash at any dumpster
Exactly.
in this town. And I know that from working at the city. So how are you going to know? You know, but people are just dumping, you know, outside of it, and maybe they don't realize that they need to call the city and schedule these big pickups. If they are not able to, because not everybody has a truck or a trailer or whatever, the city will come and pick it up. But, you know, how are they going to be, you know, being aware of that?
right, and that goes back to communication, which
Absolutely.
right now it's not good. You're counting on a garbage truck driver to remember to tell his supervisor that we need to get somebody out there to pick it up, and it ends up just not happening. So there's ways to do these things to where you don't have a mattress or a couch in your alley for 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I agree with you 100%. And I got to admit, I'm as guilty as anybody. If my dumpster's full because my neighbor overflowed it, I'm going to use another one. I still have to get rid of my trash. So,
I have a quick question. Councilman, you were saying that the city plan has not been looked at in maybe 8 years or so. You've been on city council that long, so why, you know, why haven't councilmen brought it up to maybe go over the city plan? Have you brought it up, or why haven't you?
yeah, so there's some items that came from the master plan that are on our annual request for state money through our legislature. So we have a list pulled from it, but I guess my point is, are those still valid several years later? Are these still things we want to pursue? A lot of those things have gotten done. And then unfortunately, due to COVID, a few things took the front of the stove, for lack of a better term. The best answer to your question is we have those items off the plan. We just have to make sure they're still valid. Do the citizens agree that that's how we need to spend our funding, or is that the money we need to request from the state?
Yes, and so then that was my question. So, I mean, as a city councilman now, why has that not been brought up? Like, is it necessary? I mean, we had 2020, everything in the city was closed down.
Right.
You know, the library was closed down, the rec center was closed down, other, you know, you did a wonderful job in my neighborhood, the little community garden, that had to close down. But, I mean, what have we done? Have we addressed, you know, what have you all addressed in that time to say, okay, now is a good time because we're paused, because everything is closed, so let's look at our city plan and.
You gotta remember, we were closed then too. We couldn't get together.
Yeah, no,
so
and
the
that-
whole thing was messed up.
Which is good, clarification,
Yeah.
that was my question, you know, during that time, what happened? Like, did anything happen, or could it not, because it was closed?
It was-
Yeah,
I mean, we weren't allowed to meet. We were doing telephone interviews, which, I mean, you know how,
yeah,
and
don't-
like, I mean, we didn't have any resources that we could go grab books and open it all up like that. I mean, it was just one of those things we were just trying to skeleton crew, trying to figure out what to do in such a mess. And
yeah, no, and that's good, it's
Yeah.
good to know, but I think it's to your point, you know, council member, you were saying, I mean, communication just isn't really present right now, so I mean, between the community and city hall, I mean, we don't really know what is going on.
And there's ways to fix that.
I don't, because that's part of my deal is as councilman, it's really easy for everybody to go, well, you didn't do it right, or you didn't do this and that, and they didn't see how we did it. And with our current mayor, there's a lot of things that he did wonderfully. There's some things that he's not great at, and I've always joked around and said it's kind of that bedside manner with the doctor. You know, Ray's, that's not really his strong suit. And so as a councilman going forward with a new mayor, you know, how do you think we can have a better communication? Because like you said, we talk, you know, we have somebody represent on Wednesdays. We used to have a paper, which you could pick up and read all the time. And the digital part, there's a lot of citizens that don't read the digital paper.
Exactly.
And so how are we gonna, how can we go forward with a better communication out there? I mean, is it through a Facebook kind of thing? But, I mean, there's gotta be more than that. That's what I mean. I mean, and that's it. It's, and I will tell you also that, you know, everybody talks about like, well, what do we do? And on average, we have about 2 or 3 people show up for city council meetings. You know, so,
Oh, absolutely, I
so
mean, look
it's
at this.
both ways.
Absolutely, and I'm not gonna sit there and pretend like I've gone to any.
Right.
The only time I went to one was when they introduced me to work. So I'm not sitting here saying, you know, oh, but look at the size of our community and how many people are standing in here and so, but I really think as far as, you know, to the communication, everybody's on social media. Most people, I mean, I don't know, I said, but this is everything.
Oh, yeah.
This is our television, this is how we pay our bills, this is how we, every single thing that we do. So I think this would be a great way to let the community in, because people have different things going
Sure.
on. Maybe there are times, maybe they've got social anxiety, maybe they're just
Right.
afraid and don't know. How can we publicize it? And maybe through social media, I think would be a great idea to live stream things, because people are always quick to criticize, but nobody shows up.
Right. So that was one of my points about modernizing City Hall.
Right.
I'm no pro at it, I promise you, I struggle. But there's people, that's what they do. They set you up with the things that will help you do what you're talking about.
I think IT would definitely do that.
But I have something to add to maybe help answer your question and lead into Jared's question. Up until 4 years ago, we used to have an annual council retreat. Now, it wasn't a party. Retreat's a bad word. It was a 2.5-day meeting. When we have council meetings, we just take care of whatever's on the agenda. That's the business for the day. So that was the time every year, the second meeting in July was a council retreat. All these things like the city master plan, when we talked about our grants, that was a chance, and I guess you'd call it a more relaxed environment. You know, the public's welcome to come, but nobody ever did. We have time to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of all the different things we wanted to do, or if Jared had a pet project, or you know, if the police chief had a new idea about how to retain officers, all these things. That's what we did for 2.5 days, and then on the last day is when we finalized our budget. So if you have these monies, $1 million. When I first got on the council, there might be $1 million or $1.5 million left. Once we set our emergency fund, what that was gonna be, any money over that, we kind of went around the table and figured out what's important, what, you got a little piece of the pie maybe. We haven't done that. But that's the times you do look at your master plan, things like you're talking about.
What is our bare minimum for emergency fund? Just curious.
So 10 years ago, it was 18 million. We have survived on 14 and a half, but it was tough. Right now, what, Jerry's like 25 million?
So, yeah.
But although all those monies have come in the last year, it's not like we've been sitting here hoarding
Oh, not
money.
at all.
No, it wasn't a loaded
Well, a
question.
lot of people have been saying that.
Yeah, no, I know.
So,
That wasn't my.
we budgeted for 14 and a half million this year. Jared's on the budget committee. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes.
We've had some excellent gross receipts checks due to, a lot of it due to this Navajo project.
That was
And,
unexpected. I mean,
right,
We didn't
and
think
then,
that was coming in.
the bump in oil prices and we won the settlement with the state of New Mexico and then some other stuff. The next thing you know, you're sitting pretty. That's one-time money. But that's the type of money that you do these things that you're all talking about. That's when you take a chunk of money and let's get our parks back in shape. It's when you buy police cars. There was a few years there, it was pretty tough, when we literally lived off 14.5 million for this city. That pays light bills, wages, everything.
My next question is, who manages the website? Is it a third party or do we have an IT person at the city?
We have an IT person, but I don't know that he manages that website. Because I had a conversation about that this morning, actually.
I'd like to visit with you about that.
It's through
privately.
Civics Plus.
Ma'am?
It's through Civics Plus. I used to work for the courthouse, so I actually helped with some of that stuff when it was going on. And it's just, the city of Rio Rancho uses it as well. And it has functionality where, for instance, for the pool, you could buy tickets, membership,
Sure.
all, like registration for rec center activities can all be purchased through the city. I don't think that they use the functionality, but it can happen. And it's a program, but the IT person, they have an assistant, she can make all of the changes and she'll send them, for instance, like the library sends it over to her, she makes the changes each week or monthly. But for major changes, it goes to Civics Plus.
That's good to know.
Where's your stand on a city manager?
I don't think
You was talking about your department heads, utilizing your department heads to manage your departments. In your time as a mayor to meet with all these, these department heads. What's your stand on hiring a city manager?
I don't believe we need one. I think the mayor and council has managed our department heads' employees for many years successfully.
Would it not, if you got these department heads, whether it's sewage or whatever,
Yeah.
they go to that one person. That one person goes to the council and brings up whether it's budget, whether it's breakdowns, whether it's whatever. Rather than having 5 department heads in that council meeting, because not just one department's gonna have a problem in that 2 weeks. That one person presents it to the council. These are the problems we're having. Because that's what we do in my little world. I have department heads, and I go to the owners and say, this is what we're facing.
Yeah, so once again, I don't believe we need a city manager, but the way our meetings are structured is each of our department heads, they all have foremen and supervisors under them that are reporting up to them to report to us. And that has worked well. Now, there's holes in any system. Anybody can say, well, there was that one time. But plus that's 150 grand that to me could be split better elsewhere. That's 150 a year for the life of the program. That's just, a lot of people have different views on it. I think it's worked well for us, the way we're doing it.
Going back to what you were saying about kids, I moved away for a while to Hobbs and they have a boys and girls club. How come that's never been here since I've been growing up? I mean, we have a community center where all the kids get together, but I mean, I've heard the boys and girls club is pretty
Yeah.
They're
successful.
unbelievable. They have one in Ruidoso, and I got a fella with the National Wild Turkey Federation, and he got, one or the other, and he got just a slew of archery equipment, and he was plumb every day with so many kids that he got COVID that's due to that. But, yeah, Boys and Girls Club is wonderful. They've got all kinds of things for kids to do.
Has that been a thought to bring it here?
I personally haven't, and I don't know of anybody that's mentioned particularly the Boys and Girls Club. That's a national organization. And I don't know, and we can definitely look into it and see what it takes to get that established in Artesia. Absolutely.
Would you think something like that would be like a new Rex type deal, or?
Or how can you
Or-
almost make it something like to be similar to, because I don't really know anything about the Boys and Girls Club, but to be something that, you know, almost mimics, because I know that some of the, candidates have gone to different states. You mentioned the dog park, I know that, another one was in Lovington, checking things out. So how can we mimic something like that? Because I don't send my kids to the rec, I don't know. It's not something that I'm like, oh, they have this going on right now. I don't know what they have going on over there. You know, besides the kids are swimming around and playing, but what, you know.
I think that gets back to the communication.
Right.
How can, and then I think we're all trying to figure out how to communicate better.
Right.
And then the Boys and Girls Clubs, they get into some of these non-athletic type things. I remember as a kid, I don't even remember where it was, but for some reason I remember going with a friend. We built these little clay pots, and
Yeah.
so there's different activities.
There's different activities. I mean, I have a 13-year-old that is too busy on her deal, and I'm having to ground her from it all the time, take it away, and she just sits there like she's bummed. You know, it's like, and my fiance and I were talking about it. It's like, do you not have a Boys and Girls Club? It's like, not since I was. I mean, they had a Big Brothers Big Sister program, which my kids went through. You know, and they still keep in contact with them. But I mean, to keep her occupied after school doing work. I mean, she does tutoring at school, but I think, like last night, she was up till 9 o'clock doing homework still. I mean, even at the Boys and Girls Club, they probably have areas where they can help with homework.
We also have a 402, I think it's called 402.
Yes.
program.
702.
Yeah, and they also, they tutor children and that's their main job. We have a lady in our church that actually works there. And they do a good job with the tutoring too.
Is
But
that not for troubled kids
Yeah.
though? I mean, because I believe you're talking about
Yeah.
kids in general, that
yeah,
maybe aren't
Not just
involved
my
in
dog, but yeah,
athletics.
kids in
I
general.
think it depends on you apply and if if they accept you. But I also know in the Hobbs Girls and Boys Club, I think their grads program is also ran through that, which is the parenting of pregnant moms, which we used to have. So that is one good thing for the Boys and Girls Club in Hobbs because their program has been able to be sustained with the grads program for the pregnant teens.
Do we have something like that here still? I mean, when I was pregnant in high school.
I was the director and no, we don't. I won't go into what happened to the program, but we do not at this time have something like that. We do have a child development program in the high school, which is ran by a very good teacher, but we do not have a grad program.
So Boys and Girls Club, something to look into. I visited one, like I said, as a little kid. I faintly remember building this little clay pot, but just quite honestly, I haven't thought about it since.
Just trying to get our kids off the streets. I'm not
Right.
saying that a lot of them are in there, but just keep them busy and keeping them from vandalizing our parks and stuff.
And I'm gonna bring up the dog park again. That wasn't a city-funded project. That was a private business and doing very, very well. So some of the ideas we have out here, that doesn't mean that has to be tax dollars. Somebody could take that idea and run and do very well. So just to clarify a little bit.
Did you say you wanted to reinstate the counselor's retreat?
In some
Do you
fashion,
think it'd be,
I think we need to,
I do too.
because that was our opportunity. Heck, Jared
I've never
and
done
some of the
it
new
before.
guys,
Yeah.
other than at a council meeting, I don't even know them.
Yeah.
Well, like that, I mean, literally, I got elected, and then,
Thrown to the dogs.
well, and then they said that, they said, hey, let's flatten this curve. And that was the next 2 weeks. And then April Fool's Day, which I thought was very, very correct for me to be sworn in, because I got sworn in to, so I've literally not known city council in and not code. So that's, and everything, us new councilors, none of us got to do our municipal league training. Like all of that stopped in the state. So literally, there's a whole bunch of this that we're flying by the seat of our pants and just trying to
I
figure out.
think every, this whole COVID thing,
The whole
we've
world's
never
like
done it.
Yeah. And so it's been a very strange deal. So, and not speaking for Jeff, but I do take some offense when people go, well, what'd y'all do? Going, we've done all kinds of things, and I think Jeff has a pretty good deal of saying of what he has accomplished in the 10 years that he's been in council. But it's all going back to communication, and I'm having a hard time with it, which is why I keep bringing it up. How can we do it? And it's got to go both ways. It can't just be, for 2 years ago, I was just sitting going, I'm just doing this, right? But I wasn't going to find value. And so it's
Exactly, a lot of us don't know, but like I'm saying, social media is so big, everybody's on their phones constantly. Who's on Facebook sharing memes, like, should do, meeting, things that are live streamed, where we can see it, and so we don't have an excuse, Yes.
How do you feel about annexing property? Because a lot of our city services are exhausted. I know the county reimburses the city for stuff like that, but as far as the property tax revenue and other things that could help benefit the city, what are your thoughts on annexing neighboring subdivisions?
So my first comment would be the county does reimburse us for some services, but it is nowhere near equitable. So I'm not going to even make my next comment about the county, but there's some there could potentially be some conflict of interest.
Yes, sir. The other
Competing for county dollars if you're also the mayor of Artesia, I'll just say that.
Yes, sir. The other question I had is and I was asking a lot of folks, how do you feel about being annexed in the city? Well, I can't have my animals.
Yeah.
There is help me out here, the code, zoning, there we go.
Zoning board?
There is a zoning code that allows for animals, I think it's 1 acre lots, or something like that.
You can have one chicken if it's not a rooster and all that.
Yes, sir, yeah. So that I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
So I've been in a couple of situations. We'll use a Tonka water out here on South 13th. They got a bind on their water. This has been 7-8 years ago. And they considered annexing with us just to solve their water problem. So we actually went to a meeting out there and it was very, very hostile. I was lucky to get out there with my skin. And all I was doing, I was just listening. We weren't out there.
Well, the council and mayor at the time just went out there to lessen to the water consumption. I belong to the co-op. I was embarrassed being a co-op member because them some bucks were just after the councilman and after the mayor. And Mayor Barks finally stood up and said, we're not here to take you over. We're just here to listen to water consumption. And that's all we invited the council out for there. And one of my biggest deals is without water, all I have is a shed.
Right.
And so, but no, we've gotten in shape out here now. Yeah.
Good. I'll just give you an example. There was a question that came up on Facebook last week. I got asked a question. Hey, I live out on South 13th. Can I vote? Well, no, you can't. So someone else chimed in and said, well, we need to address that. If you're using city services, you ought to be able to vote for your elected representative. I said, well, I'm not going to say I disagree with you, but now we got to start talking about taxes, codes. Do you want to go by our city codes? Do you want to pay gross receipts? Because if you have the privilege to elect the people that you feel are representing you, is it really fair to the residents that you don't have to even abide by the rules we make, yet you get to elect those officers? And anyway, when you start talking about bringing people into the city, it gets controversial really quick.
I just think they have other assets, like infrastructure. I was kind of leading into that. Infrastructure is the most expensive cost into housing. And so one of your initiatives to bring in affordable housing just for city employees, but in the grand scheme of things, it could help everyone. And so I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were on incentivizing housing. And I use the word incentivizing loosely, but
Yeah, I have one other property, and you know it well. I think what we need, and I've been approached many times, is some gated housing for our elderly. So whether they be widowed or for whatever reason can't stay in their home that they worked and lived in all their lives, maybe they've lost a spouse, whatever the reason be, but they want to stay in their house because they feel secure. If we could give them an option, something that's a little more affordable for them, that's secure, that puts a house on the market. Typically nice homes. So there's some things you can do to help housing without building houses. Some people that are looking to maybe downgrade, whether it be financially or security, like I mentioned, that opens housing up. So that's just one thought I've had on it.
Because we have a bunch of wonderful ladies that are elderly that live in apartments in Roswell because we don't have that type of housing here for them. To where if we did, those families would have their loved one here instead of in Roswell. So I think that is a big issue is for our, I know that Facebook and everything, that's awesome. But also we can't forget our elderly because they're the ones that raised us and built this town and, you know, we can't forget about those elderly people too.
I was on a ladder changing a light bulb, as a matter of fact, last summer, and I heard somebody calling. I looked down, I'd never, back to work, Jeff. Well, it was an elderly lady, and that's exactly what she was asking me about. She said, they have this thing in Roswell, and gave me the address, and it's all fenced off, and it's secure. Why don't we have something like that here? Because I'm living alone, I really can't afford it. Why can't we have some kind of an option for us? And puts a house on the market as well. So there's all kinds of options out there besides just building houses that we can look at with the right people. Anything else?
Yeah. I'm not a parent. If I was, I'd be in jail. When you take these kids and you put a rag on their face, they're running around the track with a rag on their face, and mom is up in the stands, she doesn't have a rag on. Now, I know we're subject to the governor, because whatever the governor says, if you don't do what she says, they take away the money.
Yeah.
But I can't help but see the intense love and passion a parent has for their child. And they know if their kid is dyslexic, diabetic, or God knows what, and they are most capable of making decisions and seeing that that child gets to where it needs to go. You have kids in this town, I'm sure, whose parents don't speak that much English. And you know they can't help them with the computer. And they do what they can. But we've got a lot of loss here with kids. Any chance of that changing?
Well, the legislature's in session right now. And maybe Rob could help me with this one. Is there a bill to limit her powers on emergency powers?
Yes,
I
sir.
believe there is.
Yes, sir. And there's also the New York State Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal to mask children in schools last week or the week before. So it's be really interesting to see how that trickles down because it's one of the more liberal courts in the country.
The other thing is the critical race theory. If you watch TV, you know, they're ramming prejudice down kids' throats.
Yes, they are.
And if you put 10 kids together and they're white, black, and yellow, they don't know that.
That's right.
They just get along. So, things going wrong, they're usually right.
What's the age group of masking kids in school?
I think it's 5.
2 and up?
Because the daycares have to do 2.5 too.
Oh, really?
For the preschool, it's
That's
2.5.
Wow.
MIT was not right.
I will speak for the Artesia Public Schools because we do, you were talking about kids that have issues. I know as far as YASO and most all of the other programs, we have tutoring after school. We have lots of teachers that tutor kids till after 4 o'clock. We have a bilingual teacher that tutors children. And also, as far as the critical race theory, I know that's coming up a lot. But if any of you know and had kids go through the schools, this is the Artesia Public Schools. And at the moment, I haven't seen any clue of that in our school district.
Good.
And that's why my kids are in the Artesia Public Schools, because with their coaches and they instill a belief in your kids. And I just think that we have one of the best school districts in New Mexico. And if you're not utilizing it, I feel like you're missing out, because we have wonderful teachers, wonderful administrators, and they're gonna do as much as they can do for your kid.
There was a meeting at the country club, I think it was in December, we had our lunch and learn, and our Mr. Parker, a few other of our school administrators, even if it does get forced onto our public school system, there's ways of dancing around.
Exactly.
And I feel like they're very keen on how to get by that.
And our Artesia Public Schools, along with Mac Chase, have sent a lot of our kids to college. And we're not talking about just the elite kids. One of my kids from the daycare at the high school that went through our Teen Mom program is now in college in Las Cruces due to our public school system and the scholarships that we offer. And he's in an engineering program. And a lot of my babies have gone to school and graduated because of the Artesia Public School system.
Ronnie?
Tell us, as a candidate, why are you better than your opponents?
So you want me to brag on myself?
Yes, please.
Well, I'll reference my letter that's on the front of this handout. I think I have the experience to do it. For one, I've paid attention to all departments while I was a counselor, or I'm still a counselor. I'm currently on the council and still doing my job. I feel like I have not stuck to my district. I've spread myself out all over town. It didn't matter if it was my district. I felt like anything I did needed to benefit the whole community. I can't think of one time that I ever brought something up that I want to do for my district. So, and J.C. Park's in our district too. So you all know we've done some work at Guadalupe Park. I supported that because I felt there was a need. I feel like I can look at it, the whole community as a whole. I think that's a benefit of electing me. I can't say I was born here. I was actually born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But I've lived here all my life, other than when I went to college for a couple of years. I was raised here, went through the school system. I know half the people in town. I've had dealings with a bunch of people in town just through my being on the council. So I think I have some fresh ideas to fix some of our problems, and I went over that you'll see on the front page of my flyer, and I tried to go into some more detail on that. I'm open to, I don't know everything. I don't know the answer to all of our problems, but I can tell you that I'm willing to listen to the citizens in the community, and if we need to bring in third-party people that do know, for example, talking about modernizing communication. There's people who do that for a living. They can tell you exactly how to do that. So I'm open to that. Budgets are important. That's the first charge of this council, is to make sure that our city is financially sound. But when there are extra dollars, that money needs to be put back into our community. We can't, as tempting as it is, we all have different ways we run our personal finances. Man, if you got that extra money in your account, did I spend it? Or our time's going to get rough and I'm going to need it. But we've set our bounds on, And as a council and a mayor, as a new council and whoever this new mayor is, we are gonna sit down and figure out how much money do we need to keep in reserves for emergencies in our community. And then the rest of that, we need to decide how we wanna spend it. We can't just sit on it. Now, I will say, with the COVID situation not totally resolved yet, anything could come out of Santa Fe at any minute. That might reflect for a year or two how much we keep in reserves. I mean, reasonably, we didn't expect what we've had now. We didn't expect businesses to close. It was supposed to be a 2 weeks, help us out here, stay at home, and everything will be better, and it didn't happen. So we're not out of the woods there either. So, but it'll be up to the next mayor and the council to decide what is a good reserve to keep. And I think our citizens need to have a say in how that money's spent. I don't think it can't be 8 men and women in those council chambers deciding this. We're sitting too pretty right now. And if there's some great needs out in the community, then this is a really good time to address them.
Real quick, just to your communication, Councilman, you know, I've been to a few council meetings, not very many, and I know I could look on the website and look up the agenda, but it's not always the easiest to access. It would be nice to know, you know, what will be discussed at city council meetings beforehand, or even just a good example is the library, right? When those moms wanted to go and talk about the library reopening, nobody really knew the process. And yes, you know, we are citizens, we should look that up, but there's no information on the website as to, hey, if you have a complaint, or if you want to discuss something at a city council meeting, this is what you do. And it would be nice to kind of maybe have that laid out and just help us understand what that is, and then also help us understand, you know, when these meetings are happening, or what will be discussed. Because I'll be honest, I mean, I don't know half of the time what city council meeting. I forget when they are. I always think that they're the wrong Tuesday.
Right.
And then when I do look at the agenda, I mean, it's very basic, but it doesn't always kind of, I know we do like zoning, right? There's always zoning ones or whatever it may be, but sometimes it's not always as easily understood.
So, and I'm thinking as I'm speaking, you know, we do the radio show after the council meeting. Maybe we need to do that before the council meeting. Here's what's coming up tomorrow night.
That could be good. I mean, and just a recommendation from someone who, I mean, I've gone to a few of them and I've looked through multiple meeting minutes and multiple agendas. The meeting minutes aren't always as exact as what happened. They don't always have all of the information, you know, which is fine, but if somebody misses it, then they read a very base level kind of update, a spark note version of the meeting, but then there's not very much like pertinent information that they could use, or discussions that were had, or what city councilman, doesn't always reflect all of it. And I know because I've been and I've taken notes and I've compared to the minutes, and it's very different.
So that ties back to the communication issue.
Yes, so just a recommendation.
It's obviously a big issue because basically everything we've talked about comes back to communication. And well, I'll tell you what I've learned as a councilman, and I will brag on myself a little here. To my knowledge, I have not responded to anybody in 10 years. They may not like the answer they got, but they got a response. So it's communication. When you just ignore somebody or, you know, refuse to answer their question, people don't like that. But I think it's important, you know, they need to know up front, you may not like the answer you're gonna get, but most people, they can live with that if you at least be honest with them. And give them the reasons.
Way back when, my grandparents were alive, weren't they announcing all this stuff in the newspaper?
Well, they still do. And so it's the Friday before, they say, you know, like it'll be, it's usually on the front page, it's just a little blurb going, you know, like this last one, you know, cities meet with light agenda, and it'll say a few things.
But before the meeting,
Yeah,
is it also?
Before, and then, because we have to have the agenda set by, what, Friday to get it on?
48 hours.
Is that what it is, 48 hours?
72.
That's 72, yeah. and then from there. So all these things, and that's kind of where I've been visiting with people about it, because I'm going, well, there's the radio thing. People go, oh, no, it's the radio. And it's like, oh, there's Facebook. You go, Facebook. You know, you tell me you don't it's just so wild to see how many times we try to figure out how to get the communication out there to where we're more transparent, because we actually really are extremely transparent, but nobody shows up. And so, you know, I mean, it's both. It's a really strange,
Way back when we had a newspaper, 7 days,
Love
16,
newspaper.
16.
We still do.
6
We
days
do.
a
We
week.
still do, but you have to find it.
in
You have to go
digital.
online and you can read exactly what he's saying.
But like
The agenda is there.
nobody, hardly, a lot of people are not computer savvy. So, you know, I'm old school and I do smartphones, but I like to pick up a newspaper
I'm
and
backing
read
up
it.
the,
It has nothing to do with the city.
right.
So, I know that, I
That's
know.
actually, that's private
Yeah.
newspaper, that
Yeah.
doesn't have anything to do with the
So,
city.
it's.
Is there a difference
hard.
between, say,
What about
Facebook or
newsletter?
just having a city app?
I'd like to make a comment.
Even my wife can find an app on a phone, so.
One thing that I have been concerned with is that, all of our governmental people, our news people, they were more concerned with people getting a vaccine, wearing a mask, or social distancing, rather than sharing the information about early treatment. And anytime anyone mentioned early treatment, their voice was eliminated. And that information could have benefited the citizens of Artesia if they knew what early treatment consisted of. And still today, there's a lot of people that do not know how they can treat themselves at home to prevent themselves from needing to go to the hospital. And I did see, I saw on the radio station, our mayor went in and talked about the vaccine, but I'm thinking that, there's a New Mexico governmental facility that utilized early treatment. All of the, oh my gosh, that's a, dog treatment kind of medicines or whatever other medicines that they use, because they analyzed what the person needed, they treated the symptoms, and they had 0 deaths here in New Mexico. But that's because they were like an entity within themselves. They were able to freely prescribe and do, and it was,
They weren't held back.
they weren't held back. There was no pharmaceutical companies monitoring the doctors and what they were prescribing. There was no insurance companies monitoring the pharmaceuticals. What are you prescribing? There was none of that craziness. This was at a detention center. I'll just let you know that my brother works at. But early treatment saves lives, right? What can we do? What can the city council do to get that information to our citizens?
Can I say something?
Not that's, we were pushing the narrative that was pushed upon us by our governor, by our president, by the pharmaceutical companies. But we were not, opening our minds or listening to,
Because you were stopped.
actual doctors who were successful at early treatments. So what do you think, or can you, maybe you don't need to answer, but I would just like to see, you would be a little bit more, open and maybe communicate that too to our citizens.
My brother-in-law is referred to as the gem hunter of Afghanistan. He has taken hydroclox, or however you say that, for 30 years. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you even print that on Facebook, they go all crazy.
Yeah.
Same thing with ivermectin. I know people that have gone, screw it, they buy the horse thing, it says how much to use per weight, and they use it. That might not
I'm
be
just
right, but
so what I was
yeah.
thinking is, the governor, she's got her medical person, do we get a medical person to, you know what I mean? I'm just throwing some ideas.
So
Just making a statement of.
I work at the hospital in the emergency room, and Dr. Baca is actually the one who kind of has helped run the plan for the hospital and give opinions, regardless of your thoughts on him as a whole. He is an educated person. He's been chosen as
at that time, we don't need a committee necessarily anymore. But you've gotta have the medical backing to publish something for an entire community. And so statistically, you've gotta get someone to get on board to be your medical person, to push that. And so, when you have a medical person who you've chosen, which I agree with him and I love him and he's one of my friends, but you have to have the support behind that. And so you can't just, he's not medical. For him to attempt to publish something that he may or may not agree with is challenging.
That's why I mentioned, she's got a medical person, maybe we need a medical person.
Correct me, does the hospital board operate separate from the city or the
Yes.
sections? They're completely separate?
Completely. And there's
They
actually
need to
two
remain that
boards.
way.
Yeah, there's actually two boards at the hospital that do two different.
The hospital needs to address this. I think that's a problem we've entered into our society is we're politicizing medicine and other professions that don't need to be politicized. They need to operate independently, and I agree. Dr. Marshall was on the radio regularly, giving objective information for the public and for, I think, our city council or mayor to influence on that detail.
Well, the issue has been politics and medicine are mixing, and medicine is not a political thing.
Well, the hospital sends emails. Throughout this whole deal, they've sent emails. Do I think it's wrong for like a city to take those emails and share them, to take that publicized information that the hospital's putting out here and share? No, I don't think that's wrong. To make it land on more than one platform so that people who may not see the hospital emails or may not listen to Dr. Marshall on the radio or may not catch the newspaper. That's the issue here, is are we sharing what others who are the professionals are putting out there, the locals that we want to trust?
I think there is things that are meant for the public to see. At the
Right.
hospital, absolutely. But as an entity, we also have the ability to share emails that are amongst us that are not for the public.
Right.
Because we're medical, they're not, and there's things that we have to do, not that they're secretive, but it just doesn't apply to you. And I wanted to add an answer to Ronnie's question. As his daughter, it's easy to brag on my dad. But Navajo financially supported this, but he, not because he's on city council, not because he loves our community, went out and made sure that police, fire, and the hospital all had respirators, all had above and beyond protective equipment that we may have never even worn. He made sure a trailer sat in our parking lot that I think is still in our parking lot unless it recently got moved, that if we needed to have triage in the parking lot, we had it. If we needed air conditioning, food, whatever, we still have those respirators, we still have those filters, and I had a coworker just yesterday say, I'm always gonna vote for the guy that makes sure I can stay alive. So COVID looked very different for a few of us that work at the hospital than it did for you guys in the community, and I know I got the community effect too. My kids stayed home, Lord help us, and we did all those things just like the community, but the medical side of it has looked very different. And so I know that the hospital, the PD, the paramedics are all extremely appreciative of the efforts of Navajo and him who chose to spearhead that to make sure that we were protected from a disease that we knew.
He was
nothing
the first
about.
one that showed up with the PPE and stuff, so.
And buckets of hand sanitizer.
And
Literally
the
buckets.
reality is, we all had the same response. None of us knew what this was going to do, what the effects of it were gonna be, what the long-term ramifications were gonna be, and how many lives were gonna be lost. We did the best we could with what we had and the knowledge we had at the time. And I don't think anybody should be kicked in the teeth for it.
I agree with that.
I still believe that we do need to, if we're gonna push vaccinations, we should also push early treatment. Early treatment saves lives at home before it gets bad.
And vaccinations do not keep you from getting it.
There's no vaccination that does, for anything.
There's just a lot of people out there that think that vaccinations are keeping you from getting COVID. And I know one person that is like that, and I stress to them, look, I'm vaccinated and I still got COVID. It's not keeping me from getting COVID. That's one thing that people don't understand.
So in closing, and to finish answering Ronnie's question, like you, my family lives and works here, have forever. My grandparents lived here, my parents worked and lived here and retired. My wife, my daughter, my sisters worked in the community. My grandkids will go to school here. So like you, I want Artesia to be as successful as it can possibly be. But that's not what it looks like to Jeff, it's what it looks like to you guys. And I think that's the missing piece, is not saying we as counselors don't have good ideas and grand plans, but do they really reflect the needs and the desires of the community? That's the piece I think we need to make sure we're including. And that's why I'd ask for your vote as mayor of the city of Artesia.